Thank you, everybody. I think this is what you officially start calling the graveyard session. So myself, Antoinette, and Raj will be in the graveyard session, and I don't actually think we worry too much about it, hey? So I'm going to try and help you through this by not being more than 10 minutes, but I do know that I have about 15 minutes. Sometimes my time is longer than what it's supposed to be. That was now my Afrikaans and English game that we start here. Okay, on to my languages. Good afternoon, everybody. As we already now know, I'm Annalene Keert, and I am an academic here at the Department of Social Development Professions. And this is the thing, my dear Indian colleagues here, is that all my life people tell me I speak too fast. So please just tell me, Philip, when I'm running a bit, okay? Is it in the system that it goes? Okay.
No, I'll give you the standard.
Okay. Because I do tend to speak a bit fast. So what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do this presentation here today is that I am going to look at two main things. And the first one is basically one slide that I talk about. Is where I'm just looking at the policy alignment, for the country with the SDGs. And then I'm going to move over to, I've picked up about 6 of the SDGs. But I'm going to keep it quite brief in the discussion on them. Because obviously I could have taken just about all of them and try to look at our performance. In those discussions, I'm going to bring in the social work role and the social work, the issues around that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to have to put on just remember to put on my glasses because otherwise I can't read here. And my colleagues online, I really do hope that I'm quite clear for you. So in the beginning, I know Khomotso said that we had conversations with people who think Africa is the country. Okay, so what I have on the picture there for you is to actually show you South Africa, the country, with its provinces, etc., and so on. And if you look at that, then you'll see that we've got a large population at the moment. As per the latest 2022 estimations, we are around 60.6 million citizens in South Africa. So a lot of people that we need to let's say that we need to take care of, or the government needs to take care of, and making sure that we all have a good life. You'll also see that we are a fairly rural country, with at least 33% of our country being rural. Okay, so there's quite a large rural, and I know in one of the previous conversations we spoke about issues, and I think many of us will know the difference in resource availability between our rural areas and our urban areas as well. We have 9 provinces in Gauteng, in South Africa, with Gauteng being the richest. And I think I know everybody who came from outside of South Africa said, oh, no, we're at the beach, and you had all of that, you can just walk over the street. But you're also officially in the poorest province of this country. Okay, this is where you are for the next few days. And it is quite a rural province, which means many of our students who are at university here, they come from rural areas, they have to travel, they have to live here in hostel, etc., and so on. All right. So this for me was the policy issue that I just wanted to address. So maybe I just quickly want to give some quick history. It's very quick because I know for South African colleagues, that's old news. This we teach our students, etc. But what you will see is that you will see that post 1994, now that is when we had our democratic dispensation, you will see there that we started on listing 4 socioeconomic policy products there that we've had. And the first one there, we had the Reconstruction and Development Program. And part of that was, remember, then we just came out of apartheid. We still deal today, and we struggle for lots of reasons with the the aftermath of apartheid on our development, for instance. But the argument at the time was that national development policy, that framework that was there with the idea that we need to mobilize all the resources in our country to see whether we can eradicate those results of apartheid. That was the issue that we had. So it had a very strong social transformation focus. Then we've shifted from the RDP, because remember, you need to have money for, am I clear or am I having an echo? Okay. Then we shifted because remember, you need to have money. The country needs to have the economic resources to be able to do that. So we've then shifted to gear, okay, as a macroeconomic policy framework. And my colleagues here would know that from a social point of view, we have also there was a lot of critique for it, because the focus is on that we need to grow the economy to be able to create what we need to, the resources, etc. But we also know that the growth of the economy don't automatically result in the well-being of people, especially in a hugely unequal society like ours in South Africa. Then we've had, so then we also developed in that space the ASSWA, which is a strong focus. I'm trying not to go into any detail with this, but with a strong focus on you need to have the processes in place for things to work here, like strong governance, etc., and so on. Right? So there's a lot of things that we've tried and that we spoke about and we thought about with the idea that we need to improve the well-being of people in South Africa. What we have currently, since 2012, is the National Development Program. Okay, that policy is our current driver, socio-economic policy driver that we are having. Right, and you see there the focus. I'm not going to go through all of that. But if you look at those 9 priority areas there, then you will see how that actually align with the SDGs as well. The interesting thing here is that when there was a mapping done, when the mapping being done, that report came out in 2021 between the SDGs and our NDP, they realized that there's a 74% similarity there, right, in that process. And that in the 26% where there wasn't that alignment, we couldn't find that, 19% of that was already being absorbed in other places. So there's quite an alignment, and that should be very exciting. The trick for me here is that if as a country we don't meet our SDG targets, it ultimately means that we don't meet our NDP targets, We don't meet our country's socio-economic policy targets as well. So this is how these things are aligned. Now, South Africa is not short of policies. In fact, we actually do quite well when it comes to policy development. So that's not the issue. We're not short on, and I mean, we've got one of the best constitutions, in the world as well. It is about how people on the ground can feel this change their life. That's the kind of challenges that we have. So here, with what I've done is that I have chosen actually these 6, and like I said, I know that can be. I'll manage the time quite well in speaking to it, so I'll keep it brief. And if you look at the 1, 2, 4, 10, 16, and 5 is what I've been chosen just to have an indication of where we are, how we're doing in terms of a country. Now, when you see my arrows going down and they're red, those are your negative indicators. When you see the orange and it's just going horizontal, that's, it's just there, it's nothing is happening quite clearly there. And then the gender equality is the one where I have, and Shana's not going to agree with me on that one, but I'll talk about that. And according to the statistics that we are having, it's one of those where progress has been made, but we'll get to those. Okay, so that's what we then look at there. So if we look at it, I was listening to everybody today, and I don't think there's been any of the presenters today that has not picked the poverty and hunger issues, especially with poverty, and had concerns. Some of us said that there's things that happen, but there's a lot of concerns around that. And if you look at it from a South African point of view, you will see that my arrow is also going down there. Now, in these statistics that I've taken this from, my apologies, I didn't do my referencing in here at the moment. I'll post that before we post it online. So in the process, I just wanted to be able to see a little bit clearer here. Philip, can I make it a little bit slightly? I don't know where I'm looking at this. Just have a look here. What I need to do there. So in the issue of poverty for us, I want to be able to see my whole slide. I feel more comfy when I do that, when I reflect. Okay. So in the issues of poverty, which I obviously can look at here as well, there are some things that it seems let's say this is one of those where we just didn't do well. Right? We just didn't do well. The interesting thing is that it seems, you have to go back, that somewhere, when we started off with this whole process since 1994, there has been an improvement in terms of poverty issues. We've made some progress. And then came 2021 and 2011, and between 2011 and 15, things were a bit pear-shaped in terms of going down. We've never really recovered in terms of that. Right? So here we sit with the stats, and that's the kind of statistics that we have in South Africa in terms of the food poverty line, which I think we all know that if somebody falls underneath that, they just do not have enough food for healthy living, to feed themselves, to not be going totally hungry. And that is then 633 rand there, so 38.37 US dollars per person per day. Okay, and then we've got the lower bound and we've got the upper bound as well. Now here's the problem that we have in terms of poverty, because there's about 55% of South Africans that live below the upper bound poverty level. Remember, that is only people that can just about afford food and just about that needs to. There's nothing else. There's nothing more for them to do. And they're so vulnerable that the moment we have increases in food prices and things, which I will show you just in one of the other slides there. Is that a bit better? Because I don't think I feel like there's an echo. Is it me? It's not me speaking too fast. It's me having the mic too close to the Okay, so yeah, so let me just have it. So then we have about 55, half the people really living below the upper bound poverty line. And the scarcity of that all is that about 25% of South Africans really have food insecurity. They just cannot even, they can't even reach the food poverty line levels that we are having. So we have issues with it, like many others have. As South Africans, we have it as well. And we have to ask ourselves the questions: how do we go? Why did we get there, and why do we struggle to go forward? And I think from a social work point of view, that's one of our key issues. And poverty is one of our key issues. When you look at the NDP, it almost often feels that social work comes in, or the discussion around social work comes in. This is in chapter 11 when we talk about social security, etc., and so on, and all of those. But it's all these issues that leads to it, that comes in there, in terms of, so we have huge struggles in terms of that issue. But this then links very closely in terms of the unemployment rate in South Africa, okay? Because about 34% of South African youth are unemployed, or people are unemployed, with about almost 60% of young people being unemployed. That also relates to social work students who are graduating and that struggle for a few years in South Africa to get a job. So we have huge issues around that. We have activism around that within our student population. We have academics supporting students in terms of it. We have, there's a lot that needs to be done because it's an issue. It's a challenge that we are having. The social workers find themselves in exactly that same position that a lot of the other young people find themselves. So if these graduates struggle to get jobs like that, imagine the many young people who do not have jobs. Let me just move on because I just wanted to make sure that we. So what I have for you in terms of it is then the zero hunger, which is closely related to the poverty as well. So what you will see here is that we've made some. So what happened is that there's a variety of indicators within the context in the report that we talk about. So there would be some things we might have made some progress on, others we made no progress, other things we dropped. And as a result, what it does for South Africa in terms of the zero hunger is that we can't show that we've made much progress there. Okay, so we did make some progress in terms of undernourishment. So that's one where we have an upward arrow. But we were not able to improve stunting in our young children. Okay, so that's one of the issues. So sufficient food for young children to flourish and to do well at school, etc., and so on, becomes a huge problem. Okay, and there's also negative indicators for obesity, because families' ability to afford healthy food, for proper nourishment, becomes a challenge. If you look at this graph that I have here, for instance, in terms of it, so the JOHANNESBURG Economic and Justice Dignity Group, they just lovely work. They just do wonderful work in terms of food security, and they always put out certain statistics, etc. This one, I think, is not a 2022 one; it's a year earlier than that. But the importance here, so I'm not going to do the whole one, but what it shows you, if you look at this graph here, is that it gives you scenarios of a household of 5 people, and it gives you some income scenarios on top. What it then does, it's then take off what we do, and they does that also looking normally at what is normally a minimum nutrition food basket and what that costs. So what it does here, then it takes that money off. So now that food basket has just reached about 4,000, it's not 3,000 something there, for a family of 5 people. And then it shows you what money is left. Now, if you look at this graph, for all the people in this income brackets here, they start having a short, or most of them. The first 3 have a shortfall. Then you start seeing when people earn like 300, 3,500 upward, there's just a little bit over. But remember, these are people that has just made sure that they have the food. The food has been deducted. And then they need to come and they need to look at normal fees, like the burial society, transport for family, kids to go to school, etc., and so on. And what you then see is that this kind of shortfall that we have. And once you have all of those deductions, you only have this group of people today, 8,000 rand, that seems to have to survive. Once, I just want to quickly tell you one, going to the next slide. So one time in a class, I was actually having a question for 4th years around something like this. And they had a test. And then I made a mistake in the test. I wanted to say 5,000 rand, and I said 500 rand. So in the test, I had to quickly, when I opened it, I said to them, listen, that's supposed to be 5,000, and everything went wrong. The very interesting thing is that when the students walked out, a few of them came to me and they said, ma'am, that mistake that you made is a reality of many of the families. We know many of those families. That's the issue that we have, Yeah, on top would then be an indication for you in terms of the increase in basic foods over a period of time, because that then becomes the issue. Very important. So what, for instance, this organization do as well, they track the increases, decreases in the basic foods that people buy to feed their families, right? And what we can see is that it becomes a squeeze, okay? It becomes a heavy squeeze for people just to survive. It might not sound like a lot for me and for you if there's a 200 rand or 300 rand increase in a basic food basket from one year to another. Okay? And for people that doesn't have anything, that's already in a zero, that's the issue that we are looking at. Okay? So because there is, so with this kind of increase that we have, and with a little bit of growth that we have in the job market, many people obviously find themselves in low-paying jobs. Many of them rely on social security, and we in South Africa know this as well. Many older people who live in intergenerational families where there are financial issues like this have their pension having to stretch to support the whole family. That's the reality that we are sitting with. I tend to want to not call that older person's abuse, I call that economic abuse of a society, actually, because that's what it comes down to. Okay. So here you can see the number of people in South Africa that rely on social grants, and you can see how that increased with the social relief that we had over the COVID period. And there's a huge, I'm not going to say huge fight, but it's a huge push at the moment that South Africa need to seriously start talking about the basic income grant, okay? So that we can't have people as vulnerable as what they are. And there's quite a lot of pressure groups of which social workers are part of, some of our social workers are part of, that speaks to us. The interesting thing here is that you don't necessarily see, and I think I want you to admit that, you can't say social work profession is active in the space. You can say social work activists, you know, are part of those activist group, and that's the questions that we need to ask ourselves in that sense. There's a lot of debate and there's a lot of there's some progress being made, but we're not too clear in terms of it. So when I go to the third one, and that's equality education, I think for me that is a very scary one, because sometimes we think we're not doing so bad in terms of education, right? But actually we are. Right? Our literacy levels are basically the only, from that group, has been the only one that showed an upward, upward. But our students, our enrollment, pre-primary participation, our primary enrollment, and our secondary completion is a huge challenge every single year, and we're in that middle now. Tomorrow, I think our independent schools had their results coming out this morning. I think it was this morning, or yesterday. Thursday. Tomorrow, it is when all the results are going to be out. And one of the things that's going to come out from different groups talking about is to say that if we say we have, for argument, 87% pass rate at matric level, we need to take in consideration those young people that never got to matric, that fell out along the line. Okay, so we have huge challenges in terms of it. What you do see here in the pictures is also the differences in terms of the type of school environment that we have. So we have what we call a quintile system. Quintile 1 to 3 is no-pay schools, where normally the students who families can't afford and they're in certain areas, etc. But very often, those are the youngsters that need to sit in classrooms that looks like this, that lives in communities where, and my colleagues that is been from this town as well, where there are some areas where children sometimes have to duck and dive, you know, the bullets to get to school. So these are the kind of realities that we sit with. And then you have your quintile 4 and 5 students, and very often in that quintile 5, that's the kind of school that you talk about. Can you see the difference that we talk about? Okay. So we have huge problems in terms of our education, and it's not going well. And somebody said earlier, I think it's Edward that said, if education don't go well, everything else, so even the stuff that I spoke about before, if education don't go well in a country, you're not going to get those other indicators, right? Really, okay? We have one now? Okay. And this is this one that I think it's become, it's such a sad reality for us in South Africa that we continue for how many years now, I don't know how many years it is, okay, that we are being seen as being the most unequal society, you know, the most unequal country in the world, with a huge difference in terms of wealth. 10% of the country own more than 80% of the wealth of the country. And then you have this over 50% of people that has no kind of wealth that they can actually talk about. They just need to survive every day. Okay? And when you look at that, and a lot of our, when you just put on an inequality lens, then we actually fall behind. I'm not talking about the poverty lens, but it's not too long now. Inequality lens, sorry, 2 minutes, 1 minute? Okay, sorry, you see, I'm going to be fast and then I'm long. My apologies. So if you just put that on, then we're actually falling behind for some of our neighbors here in the African region as well. So we have huge challenges in terms of it. What it does is that it relates into this kind of issue. You know, this different kind of lifestyles that people have. If I had to take you through Quebeca, then you will get, I think we live all within the hotel, you live around this area, it looks nicer, and the university is around this area, and then you don't really see what's happening there. And what happens is that those are the people that need to come work in these houses here, that spend more than half their money just to get a taxi to come and work here as well. It's a huge thing for people to work with and to live with, and I almost there, Marlene. I promise. I'm going to have this very quickly. I do have 16, and then I have the last one, okay? So the reason why I wanted to touch on this, I wasn't going to do it. I was going to just point it out, okay? But we have issues. You've seen the message that we've sent you and said, just don't take everything for granted. Don't work alone at night, etc., and so on, right? So there are some indicators in terms of SDG 16 that we're doing better in terms of access to justice and freedom of speech, you know, that kind of thing we have. But there's a huge amount of South Africans or that don't feel safe necessarily in their houses or on the street when they walk, etc., and so on. So those are the kind of things that we are, and there doesn't seem to have been any decrease in issues around homicide and issues of corruption, etc., and so on. So while we had some improvements, there's a whole lot of those things that matters to people every day that hasn't seen an improvement for people. And these are just the stats that I have there for you, okay? And if you look at 6 months, there's been 6 months, 4 months there, okay? That you have about 7,000 murders within the country. That gives you the idea as well. But I'm not going to go into just the feel for the fact that that's one that doesn't go right. So the last thing that I wanted to say then, which is the last one, is that while it seems as if we, according to our statistics, has made some progress in terms of gender equality, because we have made some progress, okay? It is exactly those things that I just spoke about now that makes us question some of what we see here. So some of the issues that we've made progress are issues like family planning, labor participation, education. When you go to a university, you will see, you know, the number of young women that has access to education in relation to men, that is there. But you do ask yourself, why, if we do have access to family planning, why do we still have such a struggle with young teenagers falling pregnant? So there's other issues happening here, okay? And if we have our final year, if we have our month of August, and one of the most vulnerable group in terms of safety in their own house are females and children, then the statistics leaves us at a question. So the social work, I think we have lots to do in terms of it. But I'm just going to close there because I think I've just gone and yeah. So can I say something that I just had a sense that, you know, I had a question earlier when the Africa panel was there, and I was saying that my question there was, and maybe that's something that we need to talk about, was that, so all of us talk about the fact that we need to have a social work education, a stronger environment with the SDGs, okay? Maybe we need to think about it, and as Johanna said, we absent in that space, we can't really be seen. If we start thinking jointly on how can we do that for these indicators that look so similar for many of us, maybe we can have something more powerful, bringing that back into social work education. Marlene, my total apologies. I hope that was 15 minutes enough.
All right, thank you very much for. Are we offline?
Are we offline?
We shouldn't be. I don't know where this comes from.
No, we are still there.
Yeah.
They're still there. They're still hanging.
Some people will have difficulty connecting. Marlene, I think our Russian colleague was having difficulty connecting. The Chinese colleague had to leave.
All right, colleagues, offline and online. We are now moving on to the Q&A. We have difficulties with people getting into Zoom. So one of the online presenters had to go, Mr. Shan from Lijian from China, unfortunately had to leave. Antonina Dashkina is struggling to get in, but she can't get in. and Alexander Mustafa has also fallen out.
And Tanita
so-
Tashkina is here. I managed to get
Oh,
in
you came in.
from another phone, from another country, from another phone. Thank you. I'm here.
Thank you very much, Antonina. All right, so I would love the in-person Pamela Singer and Anita keep joining here for questions from the audience, online and offline. And while we are waiting for our guests, I would love to say a thank you for all the presenters today, also for the panel before, but especially this time for the BRICS panel. It's been really interesting for me to listen from an outside BRICS country perspective. And I have done not a complete sum up, which is merely impossible, but I made some, it's not a real question, but it's more kind of reflections about it. Because what I found really interesting is that the BRICS countries, now I'm generalizing a little bit, I'm sorry beforehand, were made because of economic growth. And all the presenters today mentioned economic growth. And in several of you also mentioned that economic growth does not necessarily or almost never go hand in hand with social development. So it's an interesting political construction that the BRICS country are kind of a joint political union due to economic growth, but as social workers, we are looking at the social growth. And the social growth rate is, as you all mentioned today, not necessarily, so it's a question, and it's also just a reflection that we as social workers have a lot to do. And then it comes to another reflection that I came up, because I'm pretty sure that all of the presenters mentioned what I would call the balance between, on one hand, the contextualization of the SDGs. Emily, you had some very good example of projects, and Annalena, you also looked at the inequality in South Africa. Mr. Shandy and Dr. you mentioned the local kind of projects. And that's in one, how do we contextualize the SDG in a BRICS context? And the balance on the other side that you also mentioned is we can contextualize, but the political level, which is on the other side of this kind of vice versa, is what happens if the politicians change. If you look at Alexandra's example from Bolsonaro to Lula, what happens if the politicians, so what is our role as social workers for lobbying with the politicians and high-level decision-making? Because as we can see in the BRICS example, that it has a huge influence on social work's ability to act. So that was just some of the kind of that you all the BRICS countries mentioned contextualization on one hand, and the political dimension and the decision-making on the other hand. So I just found that very interesting because the BRICS countries were made due to growth. So that was kind of just an intro to the Q&As. And then I would like first to ask if you have any questions from the audience here. Yeah.
This is related to the speaker from Professor, I'm forgetting the name now. Okay, thank you. You mentioned a lot of livelihood activities that are made. I'm unaware myself. Okay, sorry. You mentioned a lot of livelihood activities pioneered by Paradigm. So I am curious to know, are those activities, are the social workers actively involved in those activities?
In India, as I said in my talk, that so as I said in India, we have persons with the degree and without the degree who are engaged with the NGOs. So both of them work, there, but it's sort of difficult to say who are more. But then I've seen that our students have been actively employed with Pradhan. And they come because we have at the department a very active placement set. And Pradhan, I know ever since I've been engaged there, last 10 years, they have been coming. And the students, earlier it used to be around 6 that they take, now it's on an average, they've been taking 4 students every year. And apparently these 4 students are with the degree who are there. And the feedback that we have got from Pradhan is that their inputs have been good. So the response to the question is that students from social masters with masters in social work get employed with Pradhan. But at the same time, I reiterate that it's also without the degree that they have people who are employed with them.
Can I say something? Hello?
Yes, speak out.
Hello, can I speak? It's Antonina.
Yes. Speak up, Antonia.
Okay, I think what we have to pay attention at the fact that, yes, it was first 4, but then 5 growing economies, which were brought together into one structure, BRICS. But to say that these growing economies should have fought poverty immediately, it would be wrong, because we have very strong economies like United States of America and England, United Kingdom, where the poverty is not as big, but still very, very big. So I think we need to have a little bit more time, the countries of BRICS, the countries of growing economy, to continue working on the eradication of poverty. We have all our countries are very, very big. Russia, for instance, is having huge geographical difficulties and vast territories. So there is a lot of things to do to eradicate poverty. So it's just, my point is growing economy and strong economy, it's a little bit, it's different thing.
Thank you, Antonina. We have a question here.
Thank you so much for the presentations. They were really, really amazing and eye-opening. You spoke about India. It was about eliminating violence against women through community participation. I'm interested to know what are the activities that are done.
Thank you for the question. So, I specifically spoke about one program which was started by the Delhi Police. And this was started by the Deputy Commissioner Police then, who was interested in the social issues. And he probably was uncomfortable seeing so much of violence around that he himself thought of optimizing his position as the police person. So he started this program known as Parivartan. Parivartan means change. And as a part of that program, he put 4 activities. One activity of that was, and this was perceived as these 4 activities would help in, doing away with, it is reducing the violence against women. And he started this in the outer parts of the city where, as per the data, the violence was more on women. So one of them was, since he was a part of the police, he could easily depute women beat constables to go around. And I thought, since I also got involved in the project, I saw that when the women beat constables, that is women in police, when they took rounds of the community in their uniform, it impacted. Because women and children and girls in the school started feeling more safe. They would, at the time of lunch break, and even when the school got over, they would see to it that they stand there to see if any kind of harassment takes place. Now the worry was that as long as they were there in their uniform, things were checked. So the alternate was they also started appearing in a civilian dress. And then that was also the time that they checked the hooligans over there. And not only this, they also went in the vehicles, the buses around, and I also formed a part of that, out of my own interest. So that was one activity in brief. Second was they did pantomime shows. And if you saw the picture, the pantomime is different from the skits, because in pantomime they paint their face, they don't touch each other, and there is always a message in that entire script. So they did pantomime shows, and on and off when I was there, I was also asked to put across a message. And interestingly, I just like to share that that was the time when the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act 2005 had come out. So I was asked to speak on that. So when in the break, when there was a break for the message, when I spoke about it in the sense that women were now free and that all these things should not be confided within home. I could see that that large crowd, many of the husbands started taking away their wives because they thought that was not something good. Why should the women be exposed to all this? And the people who are doing this are all nonsense. So that is one of the pantomime shows. The third one I spoke about was the women's safety committees, where the social workers came actively into the picture there, and they started mobilizing the women to just come out. So there was a technique, and the technique also involved rapport formation. So as a social worker, you just can't go there and say, I'm here to do this. No. So they started visiting the houses, they started engaging the women, and somewhere we see economics works. The moment you say, let's get together for some saving and thrift societies, things start moving. So you start with softer issues or issues that interest them, and then you go to more serious ones. And then during this meeting, they started exchanging that, and they realized that they all were in the same boat when it came to violence against women. And that is where, then we also started giving them whistles, or we started, so that they could whistle or they could get all the women out of the labor out. It wasn't very successful because we did more engagement, and we realized that the women beat constables or police, otherwise they were overburdened with work. So, but I thought that was something very good that he had introduced. And the fourth one was in the 4 components book. The fourth one was capacitating the girls in the schools. So we took that the person had identified the girls, the schools really wanted to work, and then he had employed a person from psychology background who did a lot of capacity building. Then they also had self-defense classes. So these were some of the ways in which the school the girls were. So that was how this particular system worked out.
We have a question in the chat, and afterwards we have a question from you, Johanna, and from you. I'll start with reading the question from Marla Pickersgill Mackenzie. It says, how was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic how has the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic influenced the delivery of social work education within the various BRICS countries' universities? What are the positives you can take forward? In particular, have you created any linkage in the delivery of course content? Have you made any changes in this regard? I don't know if any of you will start. Antonia, do you want to start, or? We will give it.
I cannot talk about universities. I think it's better for professors to answer this question.
I'll give the microphone to Antonia.
Okay, I think one of the things is that we just recognize the economic challenges within our countries, and one of the learning, things, one of the stark issues that confronted us as countries was that when COVID hit and we went online as emergency remote learning, for instance, that we had huge struggles with the balance again, the inequalities between students of who could immediately get online and who needed to struggle. Universities had to, and I'm going to speak from a South African point of view. So universities immediately had to start looking at making sure that students had devices. So that took time, to be able to get that right. And then even as students were having devices, they were also impacted by the access to data from where they are at home, the home conditions in small environments, etc. So it was a huge learning that I think when we talk about how does it change the education in that way, the learning came that you will have to make sure that there are certain things in place, because these kind of things are unpredictable. You couldn't predict the pandemic. You hardly could, but you also could not predict how long it was going to be with us. I think for many people, we thought, 6 months, etc., and it's going to be all over. It was with us for 2 years plus, So some of the ways that you thought that you needed to be responded to, it's different because it's sort of over a long period of time. But I think the issue, the big learning is how the inequalities that when the students are moved out of the classroom, how those inequalities hits their ability to access learning. So I think that was a huge one. I think we have learned from, as groups, because we now had to go online, and for the first time we could think, that we were aware of the fact that actually we can engage academically with each other online, and we can think differently about how we engage our students online as well. So there's definitely an opportunity in terms of universities across the different countries working closer together, looking at. But I cannot speak for other universities at this point. I can speak for us, for instance, okay? And it would still be different for different universities of Africa as well. We don't have a specific strategy of saying how would we as BRICS countries work together, and how will we start bringing together the thinking around our education. I think we can do a lot more in that way. I think we can really do a lot more in that.
Yeah, in fact, I feel, I agree with what Annalene has said, and I feel this is a very important question. And for me, so mostly because I took over 2 months after the pandemic struck. And for me, so the earlier person who was heading, she continued, and then immediately when the gravity of the hardship started, it was immediately, we were over saying that I can't do it. And so for me, I took over when the question papers had to be received, because examinations were coming on, and the question papers had to be received. So how do you do it? Because there's this entire thing of confidentiality, and earlier it used to be in the paper and seal, and now how do you do it? So the other person had started saying that put it in the pen drive and hand it over to the warden who stays in the hostel, but then assuming that the warden doesn't face any threat. So for me, it came up this way. Then I took it on the email, and we had long moderation committees on the online committees itself. And so one of these things. Then secondly, it was difficult for most of us to get accustomed to the new terminology that was coming up, like Google or even the various online things. So the lectures are fast, and this some also I found it very difficult. So at least we got used to that. But rightly said, the inequalities, and here is also we saw the gender bias. Because in India we saw that things were more accessible to the boys. They could access online classes, but when, for example, if there was one mobile or one laptop, so the boys had better access than the girls. That is another thing we faced. Then immediately after 2 years, the offline thing started again in my head. And it was equally difficult to go offline after having gone 2 years of online, because COVID appropriate behavior had to be, it had to be there. Yeah. So now with the limited classes and 100 plus students who had to be fit in those classes, how do you do it? So then LAN connections had to be got, approaching the university for LAN connections, which wasn't very easy. And then of course, the poor internet connectivity that she mentioned. And then when things started improving, there was this major demand for the hostel. So we had a hostel, and there was this, they opened the hostel, which you could not do because ours is also a residential area, and there was a lot of resistance from the residents. So then I had to connect with the university for wherever we could get a space to put our students. Then regarding, of course, we all got used to the taking classes online, which wasn't very easy because the batches which were there for 2 years, I hardly get to know. And when they reach me, I hardly get to understand who they are. And I put across, are they MPhil student or are they PhD students? So that kind of connectivity, especially When you are in a social work department where we engage with the students, that got missing. And that fieldwork got impacted. The fieldwork majorly got impacted in where we say fieldwork is the signature pedagogy of social work education. So I could not imagine fieldwork online. And the students of those 2 years really feel are at a disadvantage because they could not go to the field. And when we're talking about fieldwork, there's a major component apart from the 2 days fieldwork that we do, we also go to the rural camps. So these 2 batches could not go to the rural camps. So what we did try to do was we had visual tours online. So with a particular organization that we took visual. So all those things were happening then. Yeah, but in the end, I feel that while we suffered, we also gained. Because during that time, I could call many resource persons online. We could engage with a wider network of resource persons, and that helped the students to know much more. And for example, today also we see hybrid mode. I don't think so. It possibly would have, been possible earlier when it was just the offline. So both ways, we interested.
We have time for the last 2 questions. Johanna?
Thanks, colleagues, for those presentations. I really enjoyed them. I was just wondering, what do you think are the ways that social workers and educators can work together across BRICS to address issues and learn from each other? You've shared such interesting projects, and it would be interesting to think of how there are ways we can work more effectively together.
Maybe you would like to start, Anthony, because you talked also about a partnership between the BRICS countries. Anthony, would you like to answer on this one?
Yeah, as I said, probably it's important to have a small alliances of the BRICS countries, universities, of the BRICS countries, social services centers, of the BRIC alliances inside International Federation of Social Workers, BRICS alliance in their inside of International Association of Schools of Social Work, just to try to bring these 5 specialists of these 5 countries together on the level of academics, practitioners, non-governmental organization of social, who are doing social direction projects. So I think this can be the way forward. Otherwise, it's really, for instance, I'm a practitioner, I'm not a teacher, although I have doctorate, I'm a doctor of science, but I am doing practice. So for me, of course, it would be more interesting to work in BRICS country with professional social work organizations. A lot of my members of our organization, let's say, directors of rehabilitation center, they can be working together, rehabilitation centers of 5 countries. It would be of great interest. For instance, in Brazil, in in India, I visited places where they work special centers to work with poor people. So it would be great if 5 countries can bring together their efforts and look at one of the topics from 5 different countries' point of view. So this is how I can answer.
Thank you, Antonina. And is your comment?
I can just add to that as well, because I think, yes, we talk about, different, I think we can learn a lot from different projects and how it's done. Amber, you've just mentioned quite a few interesting projects there as well. But if you think about the fact that when we look at, why, as you said earlier, why BRICS has been formed in the first place, looking at socio-economic development, if you think about the SDGs, and if we can figure out ways that we can work together in terms of this, we really speak to our governments in the sense that to say, to bring the social work footprint into development in that way. I don't think it's very strong enough, but if we, so when we are looking at tick boxes, like we've done, I think as some of what I've mentioned, there's no look at what are the tick boxes, what is going wrong, what is not there. But then the social work agenda becomes part of that drive of our achievements of your development targets that you are having. Because now we join as a group of BRICS countries, we jointly speak about those indicators in our countries that's not going right. We can look at why, what the reasons are, and we can work on programs together, but we can also put voice together that then becomes stronger in terms of governments working towards achieving for the well-being of people in different ways.
Thank you. And there was a beautiful overlap to the next global agenda. But we have one last question. You have a short response as well.
So I just got tempted to also respond. So 2 points came to my mind. I think the projects that are there as a part of IASSW, where I think there is a requirement that you have to have a member of the IASSW to be a part of. So I think that also leads to exchange of ideas. And number two, I feel that informally, I don't know what the formal kind of arrangement that can be made, but that's also been set by an arrangement. But informally, one could immediately start by having an exchange online. For example, to me, my mind, as I was also talking to Shahana and I've been meeting everyone, so you get to know more people, and at least you can start an online exchange with your students, at least discussion groups or study groups online, because things are different. And there's something also coming up like internationalization of curriculum. In our university, we are a member of ASSWA, and we are also probably trying to modify our syllabus to sort of incorporate certain aspects which makes it easy for our students to travel and to get adjusted when they are studying abroad. So I think apart from that, all these things, the online meetings, discussions would enhance that internationalization also. And it would be also leading towards the SDGs where we talk about quality education. Thank you.
You want short?
I have one short question up there.
Okay, mine is not a question. It's a short one. It's not a question.
Thank you very much, Madeline. I think it's good that I'm coming in right at the end. I want to ask a general question about the SDGs, directed not particularly at the panel, but I think there is a place there for the panel to also come in. It's directed at the international body, IASSW, ASSWA, and at that level as well. And interestingly, we have the BRICS presented here, which is very nice. I must commend the organizers for bringing aspect in. I want to challenge the instructors at that level to think beyond the SDGs and to bring into that space issues of contemporary issues of allowing, especially the global south, to find own solutions to challenges which most of them in the main result from coloniality, a long history of coloniality. And I do not see how we may effectively address challenges faced by nations in the global south without making specific reference and coming up with systemic ways of addressing the legacy of coloniality. And I'm wondering, in terms of our reflections on SDGs, how far have we gone in terms of looking at contextual issues in the various regions and allowing those regions to bring the forth their unique ways of addressing these things, because I believe there are specific knowledge systems in all of those regions and experiences that are so valuable that needs to be brought forward And as part of responding to all these issues that are raised with the SDGs, instead of just looking at them as, of course, they apply universally, but when you go to localities, there are certain specific, unique differences that are specific to those contexts. And my feeling is just that it seems we're not bringing that strongly. And I'm wondering what beyond the SDGs, are we going to come up with another set of concepts that will keep, reflecting on, but not making a meaningful impact in terms of changing the lives. I mean, the structural issues remains intact. The systems that have created this kind of problems that we're dealing with remains intact. When are we getting to those root causes? Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very relevant question and comment. It was an open question for pretty much all board members from the different associations, so pretty much the whole room. So I think before we move on, we have time for one of you to answer shortly. Otherwise, I'll give it to you, Anthony.
I'm not sure whether Priscilla actually wanted me to respond to that. Yeah. Yeah, so let me ask the person now to respond to it, okay?
Did you want to respond shortly, Antonina? All right, we will have a short response from you, Antonina.
Now, if you can remember, I'm sorry, I can't remember, but when we started off, I think it was Johanna in the beginning with the first panel, was also talking about the challenging the SDGs as well. More not just in terms of what goes on in countries, because remember the presentations we've done, I was pretty much within the country setup that we've done, but also, the global south-north inequalities that makes it easier for some to be able to achieve it and for others not. Now, if we look at the SDGs to some extent, I think for government, etc., and so on also, it allows for almost like a central focus of knowing where to go to, and it gives a bit of a tick box thing. If we look at the responses that we have, if we think about the feedback that we've just given in terms of countries where we do well, where we're not doing well, where it looks like we've done well, we're going down, etc. The issue that you brought up there in terms of contextualized and historical inequalities and all of that that comes with it, pretty much would, and we haven't mentioned that clearly, would be some of those underlying issues that makes us look like we're going forward, pulling back again because we have unequal relationships, not only within our country, but amongst our countries as well. And that makes it much more difficult. So I suppose for me, so I don't have an answer for you, but I think the other part of what you're saying is that, so what is there, right? Debate coming, how do we address that part that becomes the colonial that are having, so that we don't only look narrowly in terms of the country's performance, but that we look at what creates that pulling forward, backward, or forward, backward. We think about South Africa's inequality when we look at that 80%, statistics that we have. The bigger question is, what is the face of where that money lies? And where does it lie all these years, and how does that have an impact on the development, for the country?
Thank you very much. This was the last comment in this session. It's getting.
I was supposed to have the shuttle.
I'll take time. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. It's going to be very, very short. One, it's from the presentation by Annalyn. I'm not asking you a question. Social work, unemployment among our students. I think I wrote something or I presented on something where I said the hunters have now become the hunted. So what are we doing in terms of changing the curricula so that they can package their skills and sell the skills? Because the social services does not employ them anymore. So now we need to package, make them eager to be able to market and sell their skills. And I'm doing that perfectly well. I've been doing that. I've packaged social work and I've made it something marketable, something interesting. So let us try and look at how do we package that? How do we sell it? Because now we don't have jobs. Policies, good natural resources, hunger still persist. Maybe democracy is not working for us.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the whole panel and all the participants online as well. It has been a long but extremely interesting day. I'm getting tired, but it's only because of the overload of relevant information. So thank you very much. And I think, Youngman, your partly could be answered by the global agenda. So it was actually a very good comment to end the advice when I start to give you responsibility, but it's a good overlapping to the more, because now we'll go from a more, it's not a local context, but a BRICS context, to a more worldwide context and how we can all, which papers and agendas we have as joint social workers. So I will give the microphone to the next chair, which is Annalena.
Okay. So thank you, colleagues. I think I've been wearing a few different hats today. We're going to go over, I know we've had a long day, as you said, we're going to go over to Antoinette. So we'll have Antoinette Lombard, and then we will have Raj Nelson who will be on after that. Now, Antoinette Lombard is quite well known to us here in South Africa, I think in Africa and in IASSW as well. And being the head of department at JOHANNESBURG University, you know, one of the leaders on the global agenda, and she's going to give us some valuable feedback in terms of it. And has been also a long-standing member of IA. And I'm just going to give over to you.
Thank you very much, Annalene. Good day to everyone. Where am I supposed to look to see the online people? There, just up there. So if I overlook you, then I'm looking at it. Okay, excellent. Thank you very, very much. So much has been said today. I think that you know, definitely in terms of what contributions are made by social workers, what could be made, what is the challenges. So obviously I also do not want to repeat. So what I'm going to do is to really look at where does the social work fit within the global context, and where does the SDGs fit within the global context, and what really unite them. We have heard a few times that people say there's a connection between social work and the SDGs. So you've seen I've also chosen the logo of leaving no one behind. And I think that also was very appropriately said today. And I'll come back to that again in my presentation. Is it too far? Oh, okay, great. Thanks. I'm not going to say much on the introduction because our IAS president this morning beautifully spoke about the context of the global agenda and where the links are, obviously with the MDGs and SDGs currently. But I just want to reiterate again that the prominence of the three bodies, international IFSW, ISSW, and ICSW, was to come together to address the global dynamics contributing to perpetuate poverty, oppression, and inequality. So what we are speaking about today are really issues that's globally affecting people and societies in a different context and in a different manner, and also the partnerships that came out very strongly. So if I can then start really with what is the focus of the social work contributing to the SDGs. And the one is embedded then in the global agenda. What? Okay, this is an admit now in my screen. Okay, thanks. So in terms of social work, the fit is in the global agenda. And the global doesn't mean it's just global. The global means it's global, regional, and local on a national level. And that is the 2012 agenda. And then I'm also going to speak about the 2030 global agenda, which is the global agenda for sustainable development. And if I refer to the 2012 and the 2030, then you know it is the envisaged year of 2030 to have those SDGs achieved. So the question is to achieve what? If we contribute to the SDGs, to achieve what? We've spoken about sustainability, but what is that common vision between the global agenda and the 2030 global agenda on sustainability? Oops, now it's stuck. No. That one. If we look at the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, it is important it's mentioned, but I'm just really putting it all together in my presentation. The SDGs are the associated goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So it comes in a package. And if we're targeting one or more of the SDGs, and I personally believe that in social work we can target all of them in a particular project, whether it's in teaching or in community practice, it doesn't matter. But it's within a broader perspective of a sustainability framework. The SDGs, its targets and its indicators are meant to achieve sustainable development. And in that context, if we look at the United Nations document, it qualifies to say it's a social, economic, and the environment. And actually, Anna Maria spoke about this morning too. And each of those targets or in terms of the SDGs, all the SDGs can fit within those broader sustainability group targets, if I could put it that way. So in the United Nations document, it's also spoken about the 5 Ps. So the social is all the people context around that, the economic, the profit, environment, all the planet issues. And then there's the partnerships to bring it all together, and the peace. A lot of talking was about the peace today, because without peace, there's no development. So in terms of the commitment, this is the broad area of the commitment of the 2030 agenda. And this is what we as social workers can resonate with. Peaceful societies, just societies, and inclusive societies. That is really what we were talking about the whole day. So if we look at the global agenda for social work and social development, in terms of a sustainability framework, I want to actually quote the presidents of the 3 tripartite group bodies that said that a global agenda has translated its vision that has been shaped in the 2010 Hong Kong conferences and other consultations into a worldwide movement with unlimited potential to achieve a healthy balance between social, economic, and environmental well-being, underpinned by social justice and human rights. Now, those of you that have really been actively involved in the first 10 years of the implementation of the global agenda would really know what change we made on a global level. I remember sitting in South Korea, looking at about 1,700 educators and practitioners and NGOs, and thinking how great it is to be united as educators and practitioners in such a way. And the question is, where are we today in terms of what we could report on the last or the first decade? So if we look at the vision in terms of the contribution, the vision of the global agenda and the 2030 agenda is a commitment to contribute to societies which are free from fear and violence, and thus give us a sustainable, just, and peaceful society. So the point I want to make is that if we say what is our role as social work in contributing to the SDGs, the question is, what is our contribution to a free, a peaceful, sustainable, and just society? And that is the context that we need to teach in and to practice in to make it understandable, the SDGs, understandable for what are we doing? Where does it fit within our teaching and our practice and policy development we can add? So in terms of the progress, the first decade, 2010 to 2020, I have heard nobody this morning referring to any of these global reports. Maybe you have, but in terms of valuable information to read, I want to ask you to go and read the IASSW-AIETS, means all the three bodies, 2014, 2016, 2018, 2020 global reports. There's a report on each region, and I want to now, on being on the air, say thank you also to the Africa continent that always really worked along across the countries to submit information, and for that matter, it's for the other regions as well, because that reports back in terms of how did you contribute to those themes that you see there with flag, promoting socio-economic equality, dignity, environment. Those were the four first decades themes, were really informative from a student, practice, education, policy, and research perspective. Now, if you really want to take the shortcut, you go to the 2020 document and you read chapter 7 of the 2020 report with a summary of really an evaluative summary of the 10 years. More than 100 publications, for instance, on students, practitioners, work, cross-country projects that were conducted, and the beautiful results that the conferences, everyone participated. And especially that third theme, in terms of the environment and community sustainability. I really think that theme prepared us to be also ready to contribute to the sustainable development agenda, because if we look at the SDGs, much of those are also underpinned to save the planet and to have a better environment, a stable environment, and for us as social workers to shift our focus. I'll come back to that in a second. So the special issue, we were talking about having different views. We don't have to agree, as long as we have a debate. And that special issue on the very, very first theme, 2014, on promoting social and economic equality, you can read it in the International Social Work. There were very different views, even on the global agenda, that people critiqued it, and to say, you know, that from this angle, because how did people get to those four themes? It was a global, national, regional consultations, so people critiqued it. So yes, even the SDGs, what will work in the one region, you've just spoken about that in the back, the context. We need to look at context and be mindful of that. So I can really say that in the evidence is there in those documents for us to go and read and to use as material, reading material for our students, or even in practice. Wonderful examples also from the reports and the regions globally. I'll come back to the second decade. So the central and transformative theme, I think that came out, you know, repeatedly also today, was leaving no one behind. But my question is also, it's for us as social workers, it's not just leaving no one behind. What about those that's already left behind? And it's how are we going to catch them? Because nobody even cares. You know, I just said earlier to somebody, we spoke when COVID struck, and it is the same with the SDGs. You remember with the MDGs, it was mainly targeting the poorer part of the community. The SDGs targets everyone because the planet is going to disappear for everyone if we don't look after that. And the same with COVID. And a beautiful example I recall in the media in South Africa, that communities that didn't have water for years suddenly got rolled in big containers to deliver in the township areas, because everyone now needs to have clean hands, and everyone is now can affect everyone. And for me, that is the inequality again that we see when it affects everyone. So leaving one behind, one of the criticisms can be is like we those are so marginalized and forgotten that I'm reading maybe you've seen the from Malawi, the boy that he started the windmill and electricity in his community years ago. A long story, but it's also a documentary on him, to say how they just, if it didn't rain in December, then it was just a given by May you will have food insecurity, everyone, and that's a given, and some will die. Those realities. So what about them? Maybe I'm staying too long still, but I think for social work that is very important. Now, in terms of the global agenda, there's a phrase attached to that we sometimes leave out. We just talk about the global agenda for social work and social development. If we look at the 2012 original document of the global agenda, it says commitment to action. So not just about the talking, about the doing, and I think that's what we've been doing, and trying to actually see what we can do more. So the vision, if I then step to the global agenda of 2020 to 2030, this is, I think, the challenge. How are we going to get the momentum? The momentum was broken by COVID because the end of the first decade and the launch of the next decade was supposed to be at conferences, which could not have happened, and then there were some online things, but it just took away some of that energy. So again, globally consulted, the vision for the 10 years is co-building inclusive social transformation. Now, under that theme, different from the previous decade, is that because of COVID, the presidency and the steering committee said, let us develop themes every 2 years, because let's see where the society has taken us. So you know very well also, before I get to the theme, the first theme, but it's all aligned. The second decade, and as much as the SDGs are integrated, the themes of the global agenda remain integrated, even from the first decade into, because they're all intertwined. And as such, also, again, linked to the new agenda, 2020 to 2031, is linked to build a more just, inclusive, sustainable, and peaceful world, and in doing so, ensuring that nobody is left behind. So the first Ubuntu came from our own continent in terms of the international conference on the theme at that time, is that strengthening social solidarity and global connectedness. And that theme was actually, it resonates in different countries, very exciting. No matter where we go in the world, people talk about their Ubuntu theme in their region. So, and again, no, consensus about how and what, so it depends on what level you look at that. The second theme really, and there was a 1 year, 2020 had Ubuntu and the second theme because of the late start after COVID. But the 2023 theme will still be on co-building a new eco-social world, leaving nobody behind. Now, if one listens to the wording in that theme, you will immediately hear the social, economic, and the environment. So the sustainability, how are we going to contribute to social change and transformation, but surely make sure that it's not just about people, but it's also about the planet. Co-building, partnering in co-building is something that I personally also believe in terms of partnering in co-building a new eco-social world. where no one is left behind, affirms a position for social work and social development in sustainable development. And if that is the case, affirm the link and contribution of the global agenda to achieve the SDGs. In conclusion, the global agenda 2012 and contribution to the SDGs embedded in the vision is commitment to action. And for that, we need to be informed. We need to know about the SDGs. We need to know what has happened in the region, nationally, how it's affected in terms of what is happening in our countries. It's been shared today also. But also, what about the global agenda? What about IASSW? What about these associations? Because we cannot solve these problems locally alone. They are too big. The causes, the structural injustices behind them really take one's more effort. The global agenda is a platform for debate and action. And that is within the broader social, economic, and political context, which was already stated in 2014, that we need to do it in that context. We've got various platforms to do that. And if you're not engaged, please do. The World Social Work Day, it's a fixed day, 3rd Tuesday of March. Make sure things happen. Conferences, as we also go on with the next theme in 2024, we're going to take on the next launch of the 3rd theme in our professional developments in practice, including student practice, as a part of, and I'm sure Raj will speak about that in terms of the curriculum, but also make sure what are the projects that our students engage in, what is the practitioners, if one asks for funding for projects, it's almost a given that you will say which SDGs will be targeted. If you're in the community with students, it's the same. So in the classroom, it's actually adopting it as part of the curriculum and part of practice, research, and policy development. The Sustainable Development Framework, there are many frameworks that we do social work in, but we need to adopt a sustainability framework where the human-planet nexus is understood. And that is about social, economic, and environmental, to be brief, environmental justice through partnerships. So it's not just about social justice. We will have to shift our emphasis to environment and ecological justice, because environmental justice is also just looking at the environment, sanitation, water access, etc., for the sake of humans. But for the sake of the planet, do not chop the woods, because then obviously for firewood to survive, but then also if the wood is chopped, the floods will take the seedlings away. So we need to also look at that in interaction. So we'll have to adopt and embrace the environment in sustainable ways if we start teaching social work, so that they can understand and practice how they are all interlinked. The professionals and the keep the partnerships strong. I think that is so critical on a global level, on a local level. We've heard several examples where partnerships between government, universities, students, social work. And I think the East Africa is really a good example for us. When they started with a professional development project a few years ago, the Prosova project, and follow up to the Prosova project, with the Australian university involved, also with Kenya and Uganda and Tanzania and Rwanda. And they've actually researched the contribution of social work in the East Africa region to the SDGs. That was what it was about. They had several publications bringing in, some of you might have contributed to those publications. They included practitioners, and the result was that that was a strategy to tell the government, because of the many, if you heard this morning, is not regulated in Africa social work, that I've seen the project in World Social Work Day, the professional association, where they had to focus on refugees from various countries. And they had the United Nations involved, they had government involved, practitioners, etc. And each of the different refugee groups from different countries also contributed and spoke. And that is really talking about inclusive societies and making a contribution from a social work perspective. Very encouraging. And Then lastly, also, that what is the challenge for us as social work? To engage, to facilitate. We heard engage the China people, it's educators joining their students, engaging in the communities. We can facilitate, we can collaborate. But the most important thing that we must not miss out for the second decade is the reporting. We have to be visible. And we have the example because the global agenda was accepted or adopted by the United Nations in 2010 when we started 2012. So we must not become invisible in terms of our contributions. We say, we talk about ourselves, we're not visible, etc. Nobody's going to come to us to help us out of our corner. We have to say what we have to offer. And to talk about the issues not going to help us either, then what is the action? So I've read it many years ago. If there's not a problem, if there's not a solution, there's not a problem. So if we've got problems, there must be ways. And maybe all these partnerships that we spoke about this afternoon, the BRICS countries, amongst us, among practitioners, that's the way to go. We just need the leadership. We need the commitment, and the action will follow. In the long term, I saw and I prepared, I wrote in 2015 on the link between the global agenda and the previous decades, or the SDGs. In the long term, the relevance of the global agenda will be determined by whether it can deliver on its commitments, and in particular, by how it contributes to the 2030 agenda. And I think that is our challenge. So the reporting on the achievements is from practitioners, educators, policymakers, researchers, students, including the SDGs and sustainability in reporting guidelines, so that we have particular question this time around is to say how what we have achieved, showing visibly to the world. I mean, when we show it, it's World Social Work Days, conferences, we invite the government, the NGOs, all the partners. As the guy from China, the colleague from China said, we speak to the boss in terms of influencing. So who must we influence, and how are we going to influence those people? And it's not going to happen without a strategy. Globally, and we've seen those successes already globally. So I want to end off to say, leaving no one behind, surely that is our vision, and I've given you some of those reports references that you can just thank you.
We haven't built in any questions in this part of the presentations. So we're going to go over to Varosh Narasan. There she is online. She was very worried about her load shedding, but it fits in now quite well. And she's going to speak to us about the global standards, okay, on social work education. And she's going to go over. She's from UJ, and yeah, she's also working on the IA board in terms of the global standards. Varosh, I'm going to give over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anneline. And I think it's very apt to follow on what Antoinette has just spoken about. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. I think this is such an awesome conference, and to have all of you on South African soil, that's just amazing. And to the organizers, well done. Colleagues, if I am repeating anything today, my apologies. It's been a very hectic day as well for many of us. Just got in and then load shedding stepped in, so I couldn't attend to many of the sessions as well. But my topic is on the global standards for social work, education, and training. I will try to skip some of the slides because I do believe that you are running late. And some of this may have been covered already. But I am on the task force for global standards for social work education, and in particularly, we are speaking about the online learning program that we're excited to be presenting to you and developing at the moment. But at the outset, our acknowledgements to Vasilius and Dixon for the global standards document, as well as to the presentation by Professor Angie, the former president of IA. And she had done a presentation recently, so it's basically are very similar. But if you look at the rationale for updating these standards, you look at many developments that have influenced social work education that you've heard about the whole day today. The global definition of social work being updated, the global social work statement of ethical principles, the need to promote global peers to support the advancement of social work education, free from colonial influences, the creation of platforms for indigenous and local approaches to shape curricula, social work's role in supporting the bottom-up development to meet the aspirations of the UN's SDGs, as you've just heard from Antoinette, and the increasing use of technology in education and practice. So if we look at the aims of the new global standards for social work education, basically we're looking at it's there to ensure consistency in the provision of social work education, but we appreciate and value diversity, equity, and inclusivity. That's extremely important in understanding, that it cannot be a one shoe fits all. The global standards also ensures that social work education adheres to the values and policies of the profession as articulated by the IASSW and IFSW. It's there to support and safeguard staff, students, service users, everyone involved in social work education, to ensure that our next generation of social workers have access to excellent quality learning and quality learning opportunities that also incorporate social work knowledge derived from research, experience, policy, and practice. So it's there also to nurture a spirit of collaboration and knowledge transfer, and to support social work schools to become thriving, well-resourced, inclusive, and participatory teaching and learning environments. A tough ask, yes, I'm sure, but I believe if we don't set some sort of standard, we won't achieve it. And I think we all can aspire to this. So what is the situation as it is? We know about the diversity in all of our historical, social, cultural, economic, and political contexts of education programs. We know that there's diversity in practice, diversity in the structures and delivery methods of social work education. There's diversity in the availability of resources and diversity in levels of development across the globe. We know about the adverse effect of colonization and educational imperialism, particularly on the development of social work in the global south. We know about the escalating and common issues and challenges affecting social work education and practice. But there have been many new developments, many new innovations. And we also recognize that there's an increasing specializations. But on the other hand, some have seen this as contributing to the fragmentation in education and practice. So the global standards on social work education is actually structured in and organized into three main categories. That's the school, the people, and the profession. And I'm going to go over it very quickly because all of us have access to the document, so there's no need to go into full detail. But I'm excited to share with you what we have developed emanating from these standards. So when you look at the school itself, we talk about the core mission, the aims and objectives, where there needs to be clear articulation. And then we talk about the resources and facilities and the curriculum, where we look at essential requirements. Also continuing on the core curriculum is the social work in context, the social work in practice, and very important, practice education. Research and scholarly activity forms part of the topic on the school. Here we look at social work education should aspire to make a contribution to the development, critical understanding, and generation of social work scholarship and indigenous knowledge. And it articulates how this can be achieved as well. The second part of the triangle that we speak about is the people. And here the people are made up of many, the educators, the students, the service users, the social work professional community. And the social work professional community are also our supervisors that guide our students. And the profession is also guided by the ethics and values. Equity and diversity forms a huge part of our profession, and human rights and social justice, economic and environmental justice also plays a huge role in the global standards. So you've heard today of the examples of the use of the global standards in social work education. I listened just now when we were listening to the BRICS presentation. We look at it across the continent, national, institutional levels, and some of them where you may have looked at the responses from China, from Vietnam, from Hong Kong. And so these are where the means where these were taken into account and looked at how we could apply or what were the implications of the global standards. But what we do know is that social work plays a critical and catalytical role in mitigating social problems, fostering social solidarity, and building cohesive and responsive communities. We build a strong and competent social work and social service workforce, and that is essential in achieving all of our visions. The Global Standards is a powerful document. It's an effective instrument which can help in ensuring that the quality of social work education will be commensurate with global standards, at the same time appropriate to the local cultural context. And therefore, it is suggested that the social work community should actually actively promote and implement or take measures to implement the standards wherever possible. So we could organize workshops on the global standards, and we'd encourage that. And we're here to support you if you want to do that, to organize national, regional workshops, both online and offline, to conduct a peer review on social work education programs. And you would have heard Antoinette give feedback on that. And she's done an excellent piece of work on the social work education programs at 3 universities in Africa. It's also important to look at developing national and regional standards, capacity building programs, and the development of local knowledge and practice models. So what I want to talk to you about now is this e-learning program that we have looked at as a task force. And I must say, this is an initiative of the entire task force. We're quite excited because it promotes professional development. It promotes continuing professional development. It is focused on the global standards for social work education, is asynchronous, fully online. And candidates, that's you and I, will work at our own pace within a specific time frame for completion. What we are looking for is writing partners or content developers, because we want to draw upon our content developers from experts and interested persons throughout academia. Each module, and we've divided the global standards into 6 modules, they shall be based on a specific aspect of the global standards. And in keeping with professional development, and more especially CPD, we will be offering a certificate for successful completion. So it's not just a minimal mark that's required. There would be a set mark that would be required, and on successful completion, it would generate a certificate. So generally, the global standards are quite generic, but we also realize that there's a need for country-specific supplement. And at a later stage, we will look at the legislation and policies pertinent to various countries and continents that we will be building in. And initially, yes, this will be done in English, but we want to translate this into different languages as well. It's envisaged that this program shall contribute to lifelong learning and therefore aimed at all levels of social work, academics, students, researchers, and practitioners. So we've divided this into phases. And our first phase was from August last year to March 2023. We've devised a framework for the development of the program. We've aligned a database of resources for the specific modules. We've started getting a database of content developers, and 2 modules have already been developed. We want to outsource and contract with potential vendors, and we've already have a very strong possibility of a potential vendor who will help us and support us on the online program. It will be run by IASSW, supported by a very strong university who's very technologically advanced as well. Most of the modules will be generic based on the global standards, taking into account culture and diversity, and subject matter experts will offer specific case studies within the framework and outcomes of that specific module. I informed you about the national supplement and that it will be offered in different languages. In phase 2, we're looking at piloting the online program and tweaking issues where needed. And we want to source content for the national supplement. And then in phase 2, also translate and transcribe the program into at least 3 languages and then build from there. Thereafter, in phase 3, we would go into marketing and implementation and further translate and transcribe into further languages. So finally, where we are right now is that we are urgently looking at content developers. And that's why I'm reaching out to you as well. It's quite exciting. You will get recognition for this, and and you would be able to take this to your country as well. But I'm urging you academics across countries to, collaborate to develop a particular module and, to develop the content for that particular module. So the information is mostly there. We will be there to support you. I will have an online session with you and support you on this. I've included my email address, vnadesan@uj.ac.za. Or if you want to contact me on WhatsApp at +27 844 521 862. I'm hoping you're going to contact me. I'm hoping you're going to partner with other academics and contact us to develop this. And we're hoping also to support you in sharing the global agenda wherever you are in your countries. I thank you and I wish you well as we conclude this conference. Annalene?
Yes, thank you. So, Barash, as we know, you normally would try, in that whole process, motivate us to get on board. Thank you very much, colleagues, for doing what you've done. And I think I just made very quick remarks because we're running out of time. But thank you. First of all, thanks to Antoinette, because I think just in terms of the global agenda, you've just reminded us about a lot of work that has happened, that's been there already, that's putting it in, that is actually already, that we just need to go and see where the social work voice already is and become part of that, and also the work amongst colleagues globally in this way. So thank you for that. Then Barash obviously came in and she's just told us there's a lot happening and we need to watch that space as well. I'm going to give over to, because we're getting to the end of it, so I'm going to give over to my colleague here, Dr. Bela, to just introduce the last few people. So the last group of people who will just put everything together and then we'll end off.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful day to spend my birthday. I'm so full of knowledge. Thank you so much, colleagues. I'm taking partnership, commitment to action, and collaboration, interdisciplinary. We cannot do or achieve SDGs in isolation. We need one another. So that's what I'm taking home without any waste of time. Barbara, yes. We are calling you to come and say something to us. And after Barbara, I'm going to call Vim to come over. And after that is Shahana. They close off this beautiful day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a great day. It's been a great day. And so we've had a lot of learning today. So let me just go over a few things that I think we've learned. First of all, we have lots of work to do on the SDGs globally, internationally, nationally, locally, etc. The SDGs are interdependent, they're integrated, and thanks to Antoinette, they're intertwined. The SDGs, there's significant diversity in emphasis around the SDGs relative to regions, countries, and schools. The SDGs emphasize the most vulnerable individuals and communities. SDGs are all about sustainability and working towards peace. IA works through our 5 regions, indirectly through our member schools, promoting excellence in social work education, educating competent and effective social work practitioners. All connections go to quality education for IA, the role of education in the globe. Although we have talked about all 17 SDGs in some way, I have identified 5 major themes that have been presented today. The first one is advocacy, and advocacy has many, many faces. Advocacy in our communities, advocacy with our students and for our students, advocacy in membership for IA, and social work having a voice, a united voice, which has been pointed out that we currently don't have. Empowerment, empowering our students, our faculty, and our schools. Partnerships, we talked a lot about partnerships today. Partnerships with social work, with social development, with organizations. We've talked about partnerships with government and with political parties. We were reminded by Youngman and Alexandra that there are many challenges in working with governments, especially when social work represents the other side of the political spectrum in those countries. We learned about promotion of social work education through promoting our profession, through our practice, assisting in gaining recognition, and how challenging it is in some parts of the world for social work to be recognized. We were challenged a little bit by Masay, who talked about the recognition of social work in Ethiopia, and so he had a positive spin for us on recognition, which was wonderful. We talked a little bit about regulation and some of the challenges and restrictions that regulation has on the profession, the practical pros and cons of having regulation in a country, and in many countries there is no regulation yet of social workers. We talked about training and workshops, interconnecting the global documents with the SDGs. And then we talked about making sure that we teach about the SDGs and we make our students familiar with them in the curriculum. So I think those are the seven themes that we talked about today. And I'll turn it over to
colleagues from our side, from ASSWA's side, this was an amazing day. I think I've learned so much myself, and there's so much that we can carry over to our colleagues at training institutions that I think is worth mentioning. From my perspective, I realized that we are dealing with multiple factors that either contribute or distract towards the achievement of the SDGs globally. And what we were presented with today is really an overview of how these different factors played out in different contexts. So we partly learned from the African experience. We saw models of social work development and deployment that are still rather limited. We heard about education that needs to be expanded. Then we learned from the BRICS group how social work is performed in contexts that are associated with good economic development. So for me as a researcher, this immediately gave me the idea that we need to have research in future where we can look at how do these various factors and variables contribute. What is the recipe for success? How can we even think about predicting whether these SDGs will be achievable or not? And these are certainly ideas for research that can be carried back to the training institutions. We heard about the need for increased collaboration, and that is something that from an academic perspective, we will also carry through as ASSWA to our constituent schools and encourage them to develop these collaborations. I think the future is bright for social work despite all the limitations, the institutional, the political, the economic factors that sometimes impede the deployment and the effective utilization of social work. We heard today that marketing and considering yourself and social work as a product and making that available to the world will contribute to more effective deployment of social work services. And in that is something that we should work more actively towards in the future. So overall, I think this was a great day, and from ASSWA's point of view, we have got a lot of food for thought, and we hope that the different schools will in future utilize this presentation today and the contents thereof in improving and increasing the level of training towards the global agenda. So from my side, I want to say thank you very much, but I believe someone else will do that part. But overall, I think this was a great achievement and a milestone in our program. The last thing that I want to say is that for me, it was wonderful once again to experience how technology, although it fails us many times, how we effectively utilized it in developing a scenario or a situation where the world is represented in this venue and it's made available to everybody in the country and everybody in the world. I would call this rapid distribution of information. And I think it's much more easier to work along hybrid lines than in the format of live conferences. And with that in mind, I want to remind you and also invite you, you will soon receive information from ASSWA regarding the upcoming conference, international conference, that will be hosted by ASSWA in collaboration with the Department of Social Development towards the end of September of this year. So we will keep you posted and keep this in mind that you will be invited to submit presentations for that conference. So we are very excited about that, and we hope to see you at our next event, which is in September. Thanks.
Thank you so much, colleagues. We are coming towards the end of the day. We were here today to talk about social workers realizing the social development goals and our role in that. And as I was thinking, this is the work we've been doing anyway. All of the social development goals is the work we do, before the goals existed. They're just, I guess, more focused. And as social workers and social work educators, we are here to change the world. This is what we want to do. This is why we all, I think, came into social work, right? We want to create change in our communities, in our societies, and to create a socially just world. This is, I think, why many of us have decided to do social work. This is usually what I talk to my students about in my first class, that we want to make a difference in the world. And of course, not forgetting our environment and how do we improve our environment and create a sustainable world for our generations to come. I guess the question for us remains as to how are we taking everyone along with us in this process, and who are the people that are still left behind, and reflecting on that very deeply as organizations. In organizing this particular conference, one of the key areas we felt was very untapped, and that North Africa in particular was not very present in ASSWA. And so we made a deliberate effort to look at how we can include those voices. And so how do we as ASASWEI, ASSWA, create the space to be more inclusive of the voices that are most marginalized and excluded if we are talking about social justice? Because we do have certain dominant voices. ASSWA, for example, South Africa is particularly dominant in ASSWA, and we need to kind of change that trajectory to have a more balanced representation within the organization and presence, so that when we're talking Africa, it is Africa, and different parts of Africa that are included. And so for me, these kinds of issues are really important when we're talking about the global agenda and leaving no one behind, to be critically reflective of how our organizations are challenging and not just reproducing the inequalities that we want to address in our societies. And I think that in the beginning of my presentation or the introduction to the chair, the panel, I was talking about how we look at inequalities also at a global level. And how are those same inequalities then perpetuated in our social work fraternity and in the work that we do as social workers, whose voices are being heard and whose are not. And again, that comes back to sharing literature. So I'm very glad that Annalene shared the book that was produced by various African scholars. But there are many other African, Asian, Latin American scholars that we're not reading. And how do we bring those on the top of our agenda? So these are also sort of critical in terms of, as Norm was talking about research, what are the different research that is done at local level that has different ideas and different models of how we can and should do social work in different contexts that are being ignored and that can inform our practice and our teaching, that can make the difference that we need to make in how we do social work education and ultimately social work. And coming back to what Mzima's pointed out, decoloniality, which is particularly relevant to some parts of Africa and other parts of Asia and Latin America, and the ways in which coloniality still pervade the way we teach, the way we research, the way we engage with each other, the way we run our organizations. And if we don't start looking at these issues, then we just continue to perpetuate the status quo, and it's business as usual. And people still continue to get behind it. We have the rhetoric. So challenging these systems and power hierarchies are really an important point of reflection of the work that we do, that we need to continue to act on as well in our everyday work. And when we have our meetings, we tend to be very administrative and get through the points on our agendas and really have time for reflection and deep engagement about critical issues that don't change the way we work and don't move our agendas forward. And as Emmeline was saying, why do we keep going back and forward, because we're not changing the structures that perpetuate inequality. So it's on this that I would like to end, that really, I think there's a commitment to making a difference in our communities. And let's continue to work together to build those partnerships across the continent, across the global south, between the global south and global north, in ways that are empowering, facilitative, inclusive, and dynamic. And how do we create an innovative social work practice and education that's going to change how we engage. And I'm really hoping that we can have more of these kinds of engagements across the globe. And as Don said, we have technology that we haven't been using effectively that we can now use to enable these conversations. And then no longer have the excuse of finances, because actually we managed to have such amazing global, local, regional dialogues over the COVID period, which this has really enabled despite the other adversities that it's created. So on that note, I want to just thank everybody who's been involved in this particular event and bringing it together, and all the ideas that came together for this, and all the various organizations. It was a great example of partnership of very many institutions. So first, of course, IASSW and the Capacity Building Committee in particular. Thank you, Marlene, who led that. And then ASSWA and Annalene, who hosted us from NNMU. Thank you so much for all your efforts in providing the venue and sorting all the logistics out. And of course, we know that behind you, Annalene, was a whole lot of other people, administrative people, the catering people, IT people, technology assistants. We are very grateful to all of you for all your contributions to making this day happen in this event in the next 2 days when we will meet as a board. And Marlene and Annalene, it was wonderful working with you in getting this together. So thank you for that. And of course, to all the fantastic presenters, today would not have been possible without you. And for the work that you put into thinking about your presentations and being here today and being present. And I would also like to add a thank you to my dean from the University of Johannesburg, Professor Kamala Naidu, who also provided some sponsorship. So we're very grateful for that. So yes, so there were University of Johannesburg, NNMU, ASSWA, ASASWEI, and IASSW, 5 institutions that brought this together. So a very warm thank you to all, and I know Zima, you're going to do another proper thank you after me. And have a great evening going forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. You must be tired. It's been a long day, but a very wonderful day indeed. I think we all learning from this beautiful experience, particularly relating to ASSWA's forthcoming conference. I think there's a whole lot of lessons to take from this. Mine is a very simple, beautiful task. She's already done a part of what I'm going to do. It's about thanking everyone. Let me start by acknowledging IASSW team led by Prof. Anna Marie Campanini. Thank you very much. Prof. Anna Marie has been very kind and supportive to us. As ASSWA, as the African region in general, we really thank you. You've been with us on several occasions, and we really appreciate that. Thank you once more for supporting this event. It's good to have you as a team with us. As Shana indicated, this is a partnership between IASSW, ASSWA, NMU, UJ, and ASSWA. So let me also take the time to thank the ASSWA team led by Dr. Homozo Youngman. Thank you very much for supporting this initiative and ensuring that you are here in person. We appreciate you for that. ASSWA leadership, the entire executive committee is here, from the president down to me as special. I'm not going to name each and every member of the executive committee, but the entire committee is here. Thank you very much, colleagues, for supporting this. And you know, we as ASSWA, we have a long-standing relationship with IASSW and ASSWA. We actually are a member, you know, direct membership with IASSW, and you know, very appreciative of the warm relationship that exists, and you know, looking forward for that continued support as we move towards our next conference. Of course, an event of this nature would not happen without a number of people running with specific tasks that ensures that we have everything that we have today. We normally call it the local organizing committee, led by Annalene. Thank you very much, Annalene. You've done a wonderful job You've put it together, and you know it has happened. Thank you very much with your entire team, your department. Prof. Fiona is up there. Thank you very much, the department here and the Department of Social Development Professions for hosting us and for giving all of us the opportunity to drink in this rich well of knowledge. And of course, the IT support. Philip, thank you very much. You've been with us through and through. I even thought at some point you're part of the department. You know, you were quick to step in and resolve problems whenever, you know, they arose. Thank you very much. And the other colleague who is not with us now, you know, there was another guy, but thank you very much. You've really, really been with us and very supportive. We really appreciate, and of course, the University of Johannesburg for sponsoring part of the cost for this event. Thank you very much, Shahana, to your department and your dean for your kind sponsorship. We really appreciate that kind of support. And to the session chairs, who chaired various components of the program, starting with Prof. Shahana, Marilyn, Annelyn, and of course, Prof. Nodobeko Bila. Thank you very much for your chairing of those sessions. You did a wonderful job, and we appreciate your efforts. And of course, the presenters. You know, this will not be as vibrant and rich as it was without the quality presentations that we received. Thank you to each and everyone. I'm not able, unfortunately, because of time, to call out the names of each presenter as a long list, but thank you very much for the hard work that you put into preparing those and your willingness to come forward and engage. We really appreciate your efforts, and thank you very much, everyone. As we come into the end, enjoy the rest of the evening and enjoy PE now, Kabecha. Over to you.
So we are at the end. So just an announcement. So this is normally the capacity building event. Marlene, thank you that you weren't going to come, and especially came, and I know you need to walk into a new job. So yeah, so you're officially the leader of the team. We've really for the day. Colleagues, so we're closing. No further speeches from my side. I'm just going to ask that the IA, the ASSWA, and the ASASWEI teams stay behind for just the call together. Some conversations that we're going to have a short meeting basically, where I'm going to give over to Anna Maria. Okay. So are you going to? So we still got the online people too. So I just want to be able to think what we might not have said, and let us say that now. Thank you to the online team. You know, it's not easy to stay online from 9 till 5 in the afternoon, and we really appreciate your presence. We really appreciate your participation and the questions that you've posed. Thank you so much.